Mercy, he murmured, extending his hand to caress her hair. A beauty like yours deserves a life far beyond this. You are worthy of more. I can offer you an improved existence. I can provide free treatment for your father and look after you as well. If you would only consent to be my wife. Mercy stood still, her tear-filled eyes growing wide with disbelief. In a captivating kingdom known as Obabeza, set against the backdrop of the verdant hills of eastern Nigeria, life thrived with vibrancy and splendor. The realm was enveloped by thick woodlands where avian creatures chirped harmonious tunes and shimmering streams sparkled like jewels beneath the sunlight. In this realm, nature flourished, and the inhabitants led uncomplicated yet fulfilling lives, all under the benevolent rule of their cherished monarch, King Azanwo. King Azanwo stood apart from any ruler Obabeza had known before. He was a man with a pure and generous spirit. The inhabitants of Obabeza frequently remarked that he was the greatest blessing to have come into their lives. He embodied selflessness, kindness, wisdom, and an unwavering dedication to the welfare of his community. In contrast to numerous monarchs who remained confined within their grand palaces, wielding their power from a distance, King Azanwo dedicated himself to forging a genuine bond with his subjects. A genuine ruler, he thought, must grasp both the hardships and the happiness of his subjects. To accomplish this, he frequently traversed the kingdom on horseback, flanked by his palace guards, to observe the well-being of the people. The villagers surged forth in droves, their arms raised and voices lifted in exuberant celebration as he made his way through. They cherished him, and their affection for him shone through in their radiant smiles and enthusiastic accolades. King Azanwo was wed to Queen Nojio, a woman of unparalleled beauty. Legends tell of her beauty, once unmatched throughout the kingdom in her youth, and from their union came forth a son, Prince Bandu, who became the pride of the royal family after many years of longing. Yet, while the king's heart radiated warmth like the sun, Queen Nojio remained as frigid as the Hamadan wind. Her beauty, while unmistakable, was rivaled solely by her pride and arrogance. She moved through the space with an air of superiority, casting glances of disdain everyone, even the palace servants. In stark contrast to her husband, who showed the villagers kindness and respect, Queen Nojio harbored a deep disdain for them. Their unpretentious manners and modest looks vexed her endlessly, and she was always quick to express her contempt. She also despised how her husband, the king, engaged openly with his anger. Yet King Azanwo merely smiled with patience. Nojio, he would declare, a ruler's responsibility is to care for his subjects. How can I understand their struggles if I do not walk alongside them? Moreover, we must remember that you were once in their shoes before I discovered you. The queen would cough at his words, yet her demeanor remained unchanged. Her presence in the palace cast a heavy gloom that enveloped all in its wake. The servants dreaded her presence, as her biting remarks could swiftly strike with harsh and belittling phrases. Her smiles were infrequent, and when they appeared, they resembled smirks that left others feeling unsettled. The village road lay deserted as she rode by, instilling a sense of fear in all who might have ventured out. The villagers murmured in hushed tones, their heads shaking at the striking difference between the benevolent king and his unfeeling queen. How could someone so admirable find themselves with someone so wicked? During a village meeting, an elderly woman expressed her discontent as they discussed the case of a woman who had been flogged for failing to greet the queen. "Ah, but I was taken aback when another joined in. Is her mother not a wonder? The one who is so malevolent, she wouldn't even lend a hand to a dying child. I recall the incident from my childhood when her dog bit me. She remained completely unfazed. She remained seated, her eyes fixed on me with a look that suggested I was to blame." Nadia Quo, the other woman, let out a contemptuous spit onto the ground. "Her beauty is squandered by her malevolence." Amidst it all, Queen Nojio remained unfazed. She was indifferent to the villagers' opinions and had no desire to alter her ways. She was simply herself, and that was all there was to it. Fortunately, Prince Bond was entirely different from his mother. He embodied his father's essence, displaying kindness, wisdom, and compassion in all aspects. Despite his silence and reticence, his deeds conveyed a powerful message. The villagers cherished him just as they did the king, holding on to the hope that he would someday govern with the same nobility as his father. King Azanwell, with the utmost care for his son's future, dispatched him to a distant realm to acquire the highest quality of education. Prince Bond exceeded expectations. He immersed himself in his studies, acquiring insights and understanding that he would eventually share with his community. Upon his return, he emerged as a leader, brimming with innovative ideas to advance the kingdom. In defiance of Queen Nogio's objections, the king insisted on bringing the prince with him during the village parades. He wished for his son to grasp the significance of love and empathy in guiding others. A ruler who lacks affection for his subjects, who fails to witness and empathize with their struggles, cannot embody the essence of true leadership, he would often remind him. Prince Bond absorbed the wisdom around him, and before long, even on days when the king remained within the palace walls, the young prince ventured out to connect with the villagers independently. He welcomed them with open arms, beamed at their little ones, and paid close attention to their worries. The villagers held him in even higher regard. His striking looks were impressive, yet it was his personality that truly captured their hearts. He was referred to as our shining star. Prince Bond was resolute in his ambition to be a monarch who would govern with wisdom while upholding his father's enduring legacy of kindness and compassion. In the vibrant core of Abadwizi, surrounded by modest dwellings and bustling market lanes, resided a humble sculptor named Owakiwi. Owakiwi hailed from a lineage of talented artisans, whose remarkable hands transformed the most mundane objects into stunning masterpieces. His family was renowned across the village for their exceptional skills, and even after his father's passing, Owakiwi continued the family legacy with great pride. Sculpting transcended mere employment for him, it was a profound passion that fueled his creativity. Even though the trade hardly brought in enough to support his family, Owakiwi discovered great happiness in creating beauty from nothing. Life had dealt Owakiwi a challenging hand in numerous aspects. Years ago, he experienced the profound loss of his beloved wife, which left him to navigate the challenges of raising their only daughter, Masu, alone. Yet Masu was his gem, the radiance that illuminated his bleakest moments. She had blossomed into a breathtaking young woman, a mirror of her mother, with a smile that appeared to banish sorrow. Despite their tattered garments and the absence of elaborate beads or adornments to showcase their allure, Masu's luminous happiness eclipsed all else. Regardless of their circumstances or the challenges they faced, she consistently discovered a reason to smile and share joy with those around her. Masu cherished her father, not merely for being her sole parent, but for the way he embraced life. In the face of adversity, Owakiwi maintained a joyful spirit, often humming vibrant melodies while skillfully crafting wood and clay into stunning creations. These simple habits infused their little hearts with warmth, and Masu frequently accompanied him, singing and dancing as he strolled. In their humble abode, they created an atmosphere rich with laughter, love, and music, transforming it into a sanctuary of tranquility amidst their financial struggles. On each Eek market day, the most vibrant market in Abadwizi, Masu would meticulously transport her father's sculptures to the lively marketplace. She would drum and sing joyful melodies, just as her father had instructed her, to capture the attention of those walking by. Her smile radiated warmth, illuminating the market and bringing a gentle softness to even the sternest expressions. The market women would take a moment to appreciate her vibrant spirit, occasionally purchasing a piece crafted by her father. On days when sales flourished, she would express her gratitude to the heavens and hurry home with the profits, excited to relay the news to her father. Yet, even on days when she sold little and came back with just enough to buy food, Masu's joy remained unwavering. She would embrace the resources at hand, crafting uncomplicated dishes and enjoying them alongside her father. They gathered to share a meal and laughter, thankful for another day together. Her father's words illuminated her path. "Masu, I understand our financial situation, but wealth is not the measure of true happiness. Find satisfaction in what you possess. Embrace the things that bring you happiness, and cherish the small gifts life offers. There will come a day when I am certain our breakthrough will arrive." The words carved themselves into Masu's heart, molding her perspective on life. She embraced their words wholeheartedly and approached each day with a sense of thankfulness. Despite the teasing from the other maidens about her tattered clothes and messy hair, Masu kept her spirits high. She felt no envy for their gleaming beads, vibrant wrappers, or even their stunning hairstyles. Instead, she decided to seek out the beauty woven into the fabric of her own life. The affection of her father, the melodies they enjoyed together, and the aspiration that someday circumstances would improve. The other maidens couldn't fathom how she could stride so confidently, barefoot and clad in tattered garments, yet Masu held a secret they were unaware of. True happiness originated from within, and as long as she had her father and the joy they shared, she felt like the wealthiest girl in all of Abaduazi. Masu's joy shattered the moment her father Yuwaku became seriously unwell. That afternoon, she came back from the market, humming a lively melody, only to discover her previously vibrant father lying feebly on a mat outside their modest hut. His fragile form appeared devoid of life, and a vision hit her with the force of a thunderbolt. "Papa," she cried out, her voice quaking with terror, as she let her basket fall and dashed to his side. "What seems to be the matter, Papa? What transpired with you?" Her hands trembled as she brushed against his fevered brow. His skin radiated an intense heat, reminiscent of water on the verge of boiling in a large pot. She felt the hot rush of panic as tears cascaded down her cheeks. She felt lost, unsure of how to assist him in his time of need. With a heart full of urgency, she sprang to her feet and rushed out of the hut, resolute in her quest for assistance. She sprinted with all her might toward the dwelling of Noka, a local herbalist. Noka gained a reputation across the land for his remarkable and effective remedies. Individuals journeyed from neighboring villages in search of his cures, and his achievements had elevated him to one of the richest figures in Abaduazi. The estate sprawled impressively, featuring numerous huts, vast stretches of farmland, and a lively household filled with wives and children. He possessed immense power, yet his pride was equally formidable. She rushed into the compound, tears streaming down her cheeks, her voice quivering with urgency. "I kindly ask for your assistance, Noka. My father is nearing the end of his life. It is imperative that you rescue him. Kindly." The sound of her cries reverberated across the courtyard, catching the herbalist off guard as she diligently mixed her potions beneath the sprawling branches of a grand tree. Noka faced her, a mischievous grin curling at the corners of his mouth. He appeared to relish her sense of urgency. "Ah, what a surprise to see you here. Little Masu," he remarked, his tone laced with derision. "I never anticipated encountering you like this. Do you recall the moment I approached your father to seek your hand in marriage? He mentioned you were merely a child, and now you stand before me, pleading for assistance." He tossed his head back and let out a laugh, the sound chilling and devoid of warmth. Masu sank to her knees. Her hands fell together. "Please, Noka," she implored, her voice trembling with feeling. "My father is everything to me. Do everything you can to save him. I am willing to do whatever it takes. Kindly." Noka's smile disappeared, giving way to a shrewd expression. "Certainly, I can save him," he declared, his tone becoming cutting. "However, I'm sure you understand that I don't provide my services without compensation. Are you able to cover my payment?" Masu delved into her bag and retrieved a handful of coins, the modest profits from her market sales that day. She extended them with quivering hands. "Take everything," she implored. "This is everything I possess. Just rescue him, please." Noka cast a fleeting look at the coins before turning her gaze back to her. He erupted into another harsh laugh. He halted abruptly, his face contorted with tension. "Do I appear to you as a famished beggar?" he roared. "This is an affront, and I refuse to accept it. Depart from my company at once, lest the fates bring upon you dire consequences." Masu wept with overwhelming emotion. "Please, Noka," she pleaded, "if it's not enough, I will work. I will repay you, regardless of the time it requires. Simply rescue my father." Her voice trembled as tears cascaded down her cheeks, yet her words fell into an echoing void. Noka gazed at her intently for a prolonged moment, then an unusual expression flickered across his features. He leaned in, his voice dropping to a gentle whisper. "Masu," he murmured, extending his hand to caress her hair. "A beauty such as yours should not endure this existence. You are worthy of more. I can offer you an improved existence. If you agree to be my wife, I can provide free treatment for your father and look after you as well." Masu stood still, her eyes brimming with tears, filled with disbelief. Noka's words struck with the force of a slap. He was nearly the same age as her father, a man she could never envision as her husband. Noka's earlier proposal had been turned down by her father for the same reason. His age and reputation rendered him unfit for her. Now, here he stood, taking advantage of her vulnerability. "No," she whispered, shaking her head gently. Her heart shattered as she came to the painful understanding that this was a futile endeavor. She simply could not consent to such a dreadful arrangement. Silently, she rose, her shoulders weighed down by sorrow, and made her way back to her hut, tears clouding her sight. Her father required her assistance, and even as her hope faded, she understood that she must seek an alternative path to rescue him. That night, Masu sat beside her father outside their small hut, the cold night breeze gently caressing her tear-streaked face. She held on to him with fervor, her voice quavering as she sang their cherished tune, yet her melody was interrupted by soft sobs. Her father, Yuwaku, was frail and scarcely able to utter a word. His shallow breathing and frail body instilled a deep sense of dread within her. She had devoted the whole day pleading with her relatives for assistance, yet all she got were justifications. No one was prepared to part with even a single coin to rescue the man who had sacrificed everything for her. As midnight approached, despair enveloped her like a heavy shroud. She gazed at her father, his state deteriorating with each passing moment, and started to hold herself accountable. What if he passes away? A chill ran through her, igniting a sense of unease. Without him, her existence would feel hollow and bleak. Perhaps I should have accepted Noka's proposal that she believed would be completed. At the very least, there is hope that Papa could receive treatment and find healing. The tears streamed down her face as she murmured a fervent plea to the deities. "Please," she begged, her voice trembling, "don't take him away from me. I am willing to go to great lengths, even at the cost of my own joy. Please, I can't bear the thought of losing my father." With the dawn, the divine had responded to her pleas. Her father remained alive and breathing. Marisi remained vigilant throughout the night, her heart heavy with each strained breath he drew. Owakui, despite his frailty, murmured quiet prayers for his daughter. He could see the anguish in her gaze, sense her turmoil, and understood she would do whatever it took to ensure his survival. Watching her in pain shattered him, yet he found himself devoid of the energy needed to offer her solace. With the dawn's first light illuminating the compound, Marisi rose with a resolute spirit, ready to seek assistance one final time. As she approached the boundary of the compound, her father's voice, barely a whisper, beckoned her to return. "Marisi," he murmured, his voice deliberate and weighty, "please don't act rashly to rescue me. I'm uncertain about what lies ahead, but I need you to understand that my love for you surpasses everything. Your kindness will surely be rewarded by the gods, who will always stand by your side." Marisi stood still, her father's words cutting deep into her soul. She dashed back to him, her tears streaming freely. "No, Papa," she cried, her voice trembling with emotion. "You shall not meet your end. I refuse to allow that. Kindly, just bear with me for a moment. I assure you, I'll seek assistance. I implore you, hold on to hope for me." Overwhelmed by her emotions, she dashed from the compound, sprinting with all her might. Her vision was clouded by tears, yet she remained indifferent. Her father required her support, and she was prepared to give up everything for him. She discovered Noka at his shrine, kneeling before a fire and murmuring prayers as he presented kola nuts to the gods. Marisi sank to her knees before him, her body quaking with emotion. "Please, Noka," she implored, her voice trembling. "I have come to a decision. I choose to spend my life with you. Please, I can't bear the thought of losing my father. Kindly ensure his safety." Noka glanced at her, his expression brightening with astonishment and delight. "You agreed to marry me?" he inquired, his tone dripping with feigned disbelief. Marcy nodded, her cheeks glistening with tears. "Indeed," she murmured, "I will go to any lengths to rescue him. Kindly hurry over. He grows frilier with each fleeting moment." But Noka shook his head, a broader smile spreading across his face. "No, my dear," he said, his tone steady and composed. "We should take our time. Initially, it is essential to notify your relatives. A formal introduction should be made, accompanied by the presentation of wine. Once you are truly committed to me, I will initiate your father's treatment." Marcy gazed at him, her eyes filled with astonishment. This man was more ruthless than she had ever envisioned. Her heart cried out in anguish, yet she understood there was no alternative. She lowered her gaze, her shoulders drooping in resignation. "All right," she murmured, struggling to form the words. "Take the necessary steps. Simply save my father." By evening, the marriage introduction had reached its conclusion. The elders sipped their wine and offered blessings for the union, oblivious to the weighty sorrow that lingered in Marcy's heart. Faithful to his promise, Noka commenced the treatment immediately after the rituals were completed. Yet for Marcy, the toll of rescuing her father had extracted a price beyond her wildest dreams. Her liberation, her joy, and her aspirations. 2 days later, the unimaginable occurred. Owakui has passed away. For Marcy, it seemed as though the world was coming to an end. Her heart broke into countless fragments, and her cries resonated throughout the village. She sat on the cold floor of their modest hut, grasping her father's lifeless possessions, unwilling to accept solace. The sole figure who had been her uncle, her beacon in the shadows, was no more. The man who once sang and danced with her, who brought joy and laughter into their little home, had now left her all alone. She wept until her voice turned raspy, her tears appearing endless. The villagers gathered in great numbers to share in her mourning. They offered words of encouragement and assurances of support, yet nothing anyone expressed could calm the tempest within Marcy's heart. How could they truly grasp the magnitude of her suffering? How could anyone truly understand the pain of losing the sole family member who brought meaning to existence? Where were they when she sought their assistance? As if her sorrow wasn't heavy enough, there was the ever-present shadow of Noka, the man she held responsible for her father's demise. Her sorrow quickly transformed into a deep-seated bitterness. She loathed Noka with every ounce of her soul. If only he had arrived earlier, if only he had prioritized her father's life over his own selfish wants, Owakui could still be with us. Yet, it was Noka's insatiable greed that had led to her downfall. The idea of being confined in a union with him twisted her insides. She would never consider marrying that man. She could never bring herself to marry a man who had taken her father's life. Absolutely not. Noka, on the other hand, held a different opinion. He allowed her a week to grieve for her father, but once the mourning period was over, he dispatched his men to bring her in for the start of the marriage arrangements. His arrogance flickered like a flame, as if he genuinely thought she would eagerly step into his home as his wife. As the men approached, Masu remained resolute. Her voice trembled with fury as she shouted at them, "Go back and inform him that this marriage does not exist. There is absolutely nothing connecting us. I will never wed a man who took my father's life." Her fury roared like thunder, and the air crackled with anger as she burst into her hut and slammed the door behind her. There, isolated and shattered, she crumpled to the ground, grasping her father's garments and weeping inconsolably. The agony in her chest was excruciating, as if her heart were being torn to shreds once more. Upon the return of his men, Noka was consumed by fury as they recounted the events that had transpired. "That ungrateful girl," he bellowed, his expression contorted with rage. "Does she believe she can manipulate and belittle me without facing any consequences? This decision will haunt her. I will impart a lesson that will stay with her forever." How could she possibly challenge me, Noka? She is my partner for life. She possesses me, and no one can rescue her from my grasp. The following morning, Noka called upon his men once more. His voice boomed with fury as he issued his commands. Fetch her for me by whatever means required. I'm indifferent to your actions. Bring her here if you have to. Instill some clarity in her. If she chooses to defy me, she is my wife, and there is no way she can evade my grasp. Can you hear me? I possess her, and no one shall rescue her from my grasp. The men complied without hesitation. With long whips in hand, they strode toward Umesu's compound, their resolve unyielding. However, upon their arrival, Umesu was missing without a trace. They scoured every nook of the small compound, glancing into every shadow. Yet she was gone. What are our next steps? One of them inquired, his tone tinged with concern. Everyone was acutely aware of Noka's fierce temper and felt a deep dread at the thought of facing him without any results. The men stood in silence, their thoughts swirling. Suddenly, one of them snapped his fingers, a brilliant idea igniting in his mind. Today is a care market day, he exclaimed, his face beaming with excitement. She could possibly be at the market. Why not head over there? Hope sparked in their eyes as they swiftly departed the compound, making their way to the market with a fresh surge of energy. Their passage through the village was marked by an undeniable awareness among the locals. The appearance of Noka's men, equipped and determined, stirred a flurry of murmurs among the villagers. Onlookers observed with a mix of curiosity and concern, pondering who had the audacity to provoke Noka at such an early hour. The men marched forward, resolute in their quest to fulfill their objective. As they had suspected, Umesu was at the market, seated quietly behind her modest array of sculptures. 8 days had passed since her father's death, and despite the tears that had left her eyes swollen, the ache in her heart remained as raw as ever. She bore a burden within her, a profound void that lingered stubbornly. The happiness that had once illuminated her existence had vanished, leaving her isolated in a realm that appeared increasingly harsh and unkind with every day that went by. Amidst the bustling market, enveloped by the echoes of her father's artistry, she found her only connection to him. But the Umesu the villagers encountered was no longer the vibrant, joyful maiden they had once known. Her face, once aglow with joy, now bore the weight of sadness. Her hands caressed the drums gently, yet the sound resonated with a weighty, almost sorrowful quality. Her voice, while still melodic, resonated with the deep sorrow of loss. Onlookers were drawn to the transformation she had undergone. Some paused to extend small coins to her, driven by a sense of compassion, even though they had no intention of making a purchase. Some, lacking compassion, ridiculed her. Observe her, they murmured, what a master of persuasion. She now leverages her father's passing as a way to solicit. Umesu remained oblivious to their words and their gazes. She found herself engulfed in sorrow, her thoughts drifting to distant memories of her father, grappling with the overwhelming question of how to move forward in his absence. She remained unfazed by the opinions of the world around her. All she experienced was the weight of her absence. Suddenly, the murmur of the market changed. As murmurs spread among the masses, heads turned to face the origin of the disturbance. Narcassan men advancing with determination into the marketplace. Their appearance stirred a mix of intrigue and dread among the villagers. Curiosity buzzed as people speculated about the latest chaos they might unleash. Umesu was so enveloped in her sorrow that she didn't perceive them at first. Yet, their powerful, authoritative voices pierced through her sadness. Umesu requests your immediate presence. One of the men shouted, positioning himself right in front of her. His voice snapped her back to reality. Umesu gazed upward, her features still marked by suffering, yet her eyes ignited with a renewed fury. The mere utterance of Narcassan's name sparked a blaze within her heart. A blaze fueled by resentment and animosity. She sprang up, her voice quivering yet resolute. Tell him, she exclaimed, that I will never approach his hut. I have a strong aversion to him and his presence. I despise all that he stands for. If he seeks my end, then let him approach. Ultimately, he has already taken my father's life." Her voice resonated through the market, tears cascading down her cheeks as she spoke. The men, however, remained indifferent. They received their instructions and were determined to adhere to them. Silently, they surged ahead, seizing her harshly by the arms. Yumasu resisted fiercely, her voice rising in a desperate cry as they attempted to pull her from her place. She possessed a remarkable strength, her spirit resilient in the face of sorrow, yet the men overshadowed her in power. Her cries echoed through the atmosphere, a potent blend of rage and hopelessness. "Release me! Let me go," she screamed, struggling fiercely against their hold. A gathering of curious spectators formed around the scene. Market women and men started to assemble, their hands covering their mouths in disbelief, some whispering while others cried out in compassion, yet Anoka's men remained merciless. Some wielded their whips, sending the women fleeing with sharp cracks echoing through the air. Despite the attempts of others to silence Yumasu through slaps and beatings, she stood her ground and refused to give in. Her screams intensified, her defiance resonating throughout the market. "Let me go," she shouted, her voice filled with raw desperation, yet no one came to her aid. The villagers stood by, powerless, as the men pulled her away. On that very day, Prince Boone rode through the bustling Boston market, as was his habit, keenly observing the people he aspired to lead in the future. The market buzzed with energy, yet his focus was drawn to a disturbance at the heart of it all. A modest assembly had formed, and the echo of a voice raised in exclamation reached his ears. As he approached, the piercing cries of a woman reached his ears, and the sight before him ignited a fury within. A group of men was pulling a young woman through the mud, treating her as if she were merely an animal. He instantly recognized her, the drummer, the girl who consistently brought the market to life with her melodies and lively energy. Her face was marked by tears, her voice heavy with anguish and dread. His mind was suddenly flooded with the memory of her recent loss. Hadn't her father recently passed away? Fury coursed within him. "Halt those men," he ordered firmly, his voice slicing through the clamor. His instincts kicked in, and the men halted at the prince's command, caught in a moment of uncertainty. Prince Boone approached, his gaze sharpening as he absorbed the unfolding scene. His tone was sharp as he questioned them. "Where are you leading her? What offense has she perpetrated?" One of the men moved forward with a sense of reluctance. "My prince," he started, his voice trembling just a bit. "She is given to Noka, the village herbalist. He dispatched us to fetch her, as she has declined to comply with his request." Prince Boone's jaw clenched. He was well acquainted with Noka, a man notorious for his avarice and brutality, even with his talent as a healer. He was aware that Noka already had at least 8 wives. What could he possibly desire from this young girl? Boone shifted his attention from the men to Noka, his expression gentle as he noticed the sorrow reflected in her eyes. "Is it true?" he inquired softly, glancing at her. "Are you engaged to Noka?" Masu opened her mouth to respond, but only a strangled sob escaped her lips. She wept silently, her thoughts tangled and elusive, the expressions she longed to share slipping away like shadows. The prince perceived her suffering. He sensed it, unmistakably. Her sorrow enveloped her like a burdensome shroud. Even in her untidy condition, she remained remarkably beautiful. He recalled her as she once was, the spirited young woman with a voice that could illuminate the gloomiest of days. Now, that light was nearly extinguished, overshadowed by sorrow and pain. He required no clarification. He required no words from her. All the answers he sought were etched upon her features, and in that moment, he resolved his decision. "Release her," he ordered, his tone resonating with power. "I will talk to her personally, and if Noka has any concerns, he can bring them up with me directly. She has recently experienced the loss of her father. Do you lack compassion?" The men cast anxious looks at one another before bowing their heads. "We apologize, my prince," one of them whispered, retreating respectfully. The prince, with unwavering resolve, dismounted his horse and made his way toward Masu. Her hands quivered as she lingered in place, uncertain of her next move. With a tender motion, he placed her upon his horse, his hand warm and comforting. She grasped the reins tightly, tears still streaming down her face. With a graceful motion, the prince mounted the horse behind her. A subtle gesture to the guards set the royal entourage in motion. The villagers, gathered in the marketplace, watched in hushed awe as the prince and Masu departed together, leaving behind a palpable sense of wonder. Soft murmurs floated among the gathering, yet everyone remained cautious, keeping their voices low. In a serene nook of the palace garden, the prince found himself seated with Masu, enveloped by the soothing sounds of leaves whispering and birds serenading, crafting an ambience of tranquility. Masu, now more composed yet still trembling slightly, sat opposite him, her fingers anxiously fidgeting with the edge of her wrapper. Prince Bundu observed her intently, his heart heavy with the sorrow she had faced. He understood that this was the time to listen to her narrative, regardless of how challenging it could be for her to share. As Masu finally found her voice, it quivered, every word heavy with feeling. She detailed it all, her father's illness, Noka's diminishing demands, her anguished choice to give herself up for her father, and the sorrow of losing him despite all efforts. As she spoke, tears streamed down her face, yet she continued unwaveringly. She had kept those emotions bottled up for far too long, and now, in the company of someone who genuinely appeared to care, the floodgates opened. Prince Bundu absorbed every word, his fists tightening in fury as her tale revealed itself. He was astounded by the callousness of Noka, a man who would take advantage of a grieving daughter's affection for her father to satisfy his own selfish needs. "That man is a monster," he whispered, his voice brimming with rage. "He needs to be halted." Masu became quiet, her head lowered as though the burden of her tale was overwhelming. Bundu's eyes softened as he regarded her. He longed to connect, to soothe and reassure her, to convey that she was secure. He perceived the void in her gaze, the desire that pierced more profoundly than any words could convey. Her affection for her father was profoundly genuine and entirely selfless, yet life had dealt her an excruciatingly harsh hand. In that instant, Bundu realized he must safeguard her. He refused to remain passive while someone as despicable as Noka continued to destroy her life. He possessed the authority of the throne, and he was determined to wield it. Following a moment of quiet, he began to speak, his tone calm and comforting. "Masu," he expressed, "I extend my condolences for your loss. I can only envision the hurt you're experiencing, but I assure you of this, you need not fear any longer. I will stand by you, come what may. I will handle Noka on my own. I will settle whatever he believes he is owed, and he will not bother you anymore." Masu gazed up at him, her eyes brimming with tears, filled with a sense of disbelief. She was baffled by the prince's unexpected kindness, a man of such elevated status compared to her own. Yet deep within her heart, gratitude blossomed. After days of despair, a glimmer of hope emerged within her, a tiny beacon illuminating the shadows that surrounded her. She wiped her tears and whispered, her voice barely above a whisper, "Thank you. I truly appreciate it." The prince offered her a faint smile, his determination growing stronger. Unbeknownst to Prince Bundu, this confrontation with Noka would challenge his strength, his authority, and even his heart in ways he had never anticipated. That evening, the queen and the king were savoring a tranquil dinner together when, quite unexpectedly, Prince Bundu made his entrance. He seldom shared a meal with his parents, except during festivals or when there were important matters to address. He didn't actively shun their company, rather, he cherished his solitude and favored dining in peace. His arrival tonight instantly indicated to them that something was amiss. The queen was the first to observe the troubled look that crossed her son's face. "Are you all right?" she inquired, her tone laced with worry. "What is it, my child?" the monarch remarked, gazing intently at Bundu. Prince Bundu savored a sip of his wine, contemplating his feelings before uttering a word. He continued, his voice charged with fury. "It seems the moment has come for you to reach out to Noka and set things in motion. The queen tensed, her fork suspended in the air. "Excuse me?" she inquired, her voice tinged with concern. "What is the situation with Noka? What has he accomplished?" The monarch's forehead creased as he shared a look with his heir. The queen, aware of their discomfort, swiftly adjusted her stance, gentling her voice. She reminded the king that Noka had always been good to her family, as if attempting to defend the herbalist before the accusations were even voiced. "What occurred, my child?" the king insisted, dismissing the queen's comment. Prince Bandu acted swiftly. He narrated the whole experience at the market. He omitted no detail, his voice escalating as he spoke, with anger and frustration pouring forth with each word. The king's expression deepened with rage as he absorbed the words. "You are correct, Bandu," he stated, his tone cutting. "Noka needs to be halted. How could he lower himself to such a vile act? I find myself pondering, is this the way he has wed all his spouses? I have received numerous accounts of him engaging in relationships with married women in return for assistance. This cannot go on." Before the prince had a chance to reply, the queen struck the table with her hand. "No," she thundered, her voice reverberating through the dining hall. "We cannot oppose him. Noka has consistently supported this family. He swept away our shame. Have you overlooked how he supported us during those years when I struggled to conceive? His concussions, his prayers, they bore fruit. We are indebted to him completely." The prince's eyes grew large with astonishment at his mother's words. "Mother, stop," he exclaimed, standing up abruptly. "What is your rationale for defending him? How would you react if it were your own daughter in that situation?" Her father was nearing the end of his life. She was left with no options. "Do you not recognize the manipulative nature of Noka?" The queen's lips curled into a smirk, her voice dripping with frost. "Are you really going to raise your voice at me over some poor, dirty village girl?" "Oh, I understand," she remarked, squinting slightly. "This isn't really about rescuing the villagers, is it? Tell me, Bundo, is this a matter of justice or is it concerning that girl?" Bundo's fist tightened, yet his voice remained calm. "It is essential to ensure her safety. It is essential to safeguard her mother. She is all alone. She stands solitary, while Noka wields greater power." The queen's eyes sparkled with fury. "I had a feeling," she whispered sharply. She turned to the king, her finger aimed accusingly at her son. "One must not permit an individual, fueled by primal urges, to dictate your actions. Noka has our deepest gratitude. Today, I embrace my role as a mother because of him. Today, you have an heir thanks to him, and Bundo owes his very existence to him." The prince gazed at his mother, taken aback by her icy demeanor, yet she had more to say. "If Noka's actions don't have a direct impact on us, I recommend that you let him be. A man can take as many wives as he desires, and there are no stipulations regarding the age of a bride. If you dare to oppose him, I promise, I will take you on myself." With that, the queen abruptly pushed her chair back and stormed out of the dining room, leaving the king and the prince in shocked silence. The following morning, Prince Bundo set out for Noka's compound, joined by a cadre of village elders. His mind was resolute, his heart aflame with a blend of fury and resolve. Noka had already reached the herbalist, and the prince's warning had only intensified his fury. Noka lingered outside his grand, formidable compound, his expression darkened by rage. He appeared as a frigid serpent poised to attack, his gaze deep and intense. Upon the arrival of the prince and the elders, Noka's servants hurried to welcome them, providing chairs for their comfort. Yet, the atmosphere was thick with tension, leaving everyone feeling uneasy. Noka's voice was icy as he lifted his head, fixing a fierce glare on Prince Bundo. "I don't recall inviting anyone into my home," he stated. His voice was laced with animosity, and the words cut like knives. The prince, brimming with fury, maintained a facade of tranquility. "It is my solemn responsibility to safeguard each and every soul in this village," he responded with a sinister grin. "Noka, I have come to settle the payment for your alleged services rendered to Matsi Uwapwi. There is an abundance here, take it and let Matsi be." In that instant, everything fell quiet. Then, Noka threw his head back and laughed, a rich, derisive sound that echoed throughout the compound. As the laughter faded, his expression contorted into a trap. "How audacious of you to venture from the palace and confront a man about his own wife." He expelled a sharp hiss. "Your mother is not lacking in intelligence, nor is your father, but what about you? I find myself curious about which of them you resemble." The prince's guards advanced, fingers poised on their weapons, prepared to unleash their fury. Yet, with a mere flick of his hand, the prince brought them to a halt. He turned back to Noka, his voice sharp and frigid. "Matsi is not your spouse, and you are aware of that. You exploited her vulnerability, capitalizing on her neediness. This serves as my last notice. Keep your distance from her, or you'll encounter a side of me that you won't want to confront." For the first time, a glimmer of fear danced across Noka's features, but it was swiftly overshadowed by a spark of mischief. "I see now," he said, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "Your mother didn't provide you with the guidance you needed. If she had, you wouldn't barge into my home like an unhinged beast." The prince's jaw clenched, his fury finally erupting. "Your history with my mother is irrelevant to me, and you can say whatever you wish, but if you don't keep your distance from Matsi, I will confront you with all my strength." He cast the bag of coins to the ground and pivoted sharply, striding out of the compound with determination. As he mounted his horse, he whispered to himself, "That man possesses divine favor." Yet, his mind swiftly turned to Matsi. She was in danger. He needed to safeguard her, and confining her within the palace walls appeared to be the sole method to guarantee that. Within the confines of Noka's compound, the herbalist strode back and forth with intense agitation. His hands tightened into fists. His anger surged as he whispered under his breath, "For he challenges me. She allows her sword to arrive at my doorstep, bearing threats. This decision will haunt her. They will all come to rue the spectacle they initiated." In the palace, the queen found herself in a state of unease. She sensed the confines of her meticulously built existence tightening around her. For 28 long years, Jom had lived with the weight of her pact with Noka, each day filled with the looming dread of this inevitable moment. She understood that if the situation spiraled, everything she held dear could slip away. Her position in the palace, her honor, her very existence. Noka refused to descend alone. He would pull her into the depths alongside him. She understood that more deeply than anyone else. This went beyond merely assisting her in becoming pregnant. It was a vow they had both made, a promise to carry the weight of their secret until the end. Yet now, as her son faced Noka, with the village girl at the heart of the situation, everything was coming apart. She was astonished by how rapidly the situation had unraveled. "That Marasi of a girl," she muttered bitterly to herself. "She must possess something remarkable to have swayed Bundo to her side. However, I refuse to allow her to disrupt the unity of my family. Not at this moment. Never." Thoughts surged through her mind. Seeking a method to conceal her hidden truth while preserving her family's unity. The night enveloped the world in silence, while the stars twinkled with a brilliant glow overhead. In the quiet town of Abadwizi, where slumber enveloped nearly every soul, the queen remained wide awake. She strolled quietly along the village path, flanked by her personal guard. The sole individual she confided in with her innermost thoughts. Noka had summoned her, and she understood that his message was one she could not overlook. Whatever it was, it demanded her immediate attention, and she had to address it swiftly. Upon reaching Noka's compound, she gracefully dismounted from her horse and faced her guard. "Remain here," she commanded. Her voice was cutting yet subdued. "Stay vigilant. I will take care of this by myself." Within the shadows of his modest dwelling, Noka moved about with an uneasy energy. His expression was a blend of rage and exasperation. Upon the queen's entrance, he swiftly turned to confront her. "You need to put an end to your son's behavior," he exclaimed. He has stripped away compassion. Instruct him to bring her back to me at once, or the consequences will be dire. He definitely has something at stake, and you're aware of it. Make sure he is aware of that as well." The queen's eyes grew large with astonishment. She was unaware that Bondo had extended his mercy and taken her under his protection. However, she was determined not to allow Noka to intimidate her. Gathering her composure, she straightened her back and met his gaze. "I honored our agreement, Noka, and I fulfilled my obligation." Noka's expression shifted, as his tone became more frigid. "Your son is crossing the line," he whispered sharply. "For all these years, I kept my distance because you requested it. It was a challenge, yet I accomplished it. You were taken from me by the king, and now it's the prince? This is the point at which I set my boundaries. This will not come to pass." His demeanor softened for a moment, his eyes lingering on her with an unsettling warmth. "Nogio," he whispered, drawing nearer. "Time has had no effect on you. You remain as stunning as always." He extended his hand to make contact with her. "Noka, that's enough. Cease this chaos," the queen exclaimed, retreating a step. "I shall have a conversation with my son. I will locate her and bring her back to you. However, it is essential to remain silent. If this information leaks, we are all in serious trouble, and you are well aware of that." Without waiting for his response, she spun around and dashed out of the hut, her heart racing in her chest. She sensed that her universe was disintegrating around her. "Bundo is completely lost," she mused. "He's toying with danger, and it might consume us all." Later that morning, the queen burst into the prince's chamber with a fierce determination. Her fury simmered just beneath the surface. "Bundo! Bundo!" she called out, her voice reverberating through the apartment. She discovered him serenely positioned at the dining table, savoring his breakfast, as though nothing had transpired. "What do you think you're doing?" she asked, her voice cutting and filled with accusation. "Have you completely lost your senses?" Prince Bundo hardly acknowledged her, his focus remaining on his meal, unfazed by her outburst. He had become accustomed to her arrogance and harshness, yet today her anger seemed different, tinged with desperation, almost bordering on panic. "Bring her out now," the queen commanded, her hand crashing down on the table. "She is out of place here. She is a part of Norka." "No, mother," Bundo's voice escalated, his irritation unmistakable. He stood, locking eyes with her, filled with resolve. "She is not a part of Norka. What makes you so deeply engaged in this? It seems as though you're concealing something. What is it, mother? Have you misplaced your sense of right and wrong? The girl is without parents. She deserves safeguarding, not treachery." The queen's facade faltered, revealing a fleeting glimpse of her inner turmoil. "You're missing the point, Bundo. This is more significant than you realize. We are unable to confront Norka. You're dancing with danger." Her voice quivered, and Bundo observed the shimmer of unshed tears in her eyes. He had never witnessed his mother in this way before. He came to the understanding that there was much more beneath the surface. "What secrets are you concealing, mother?" he inquired, his tone gentle yet brimming with intrigue. "What makes you behave so timidly?" The queen's lips trembled slightly. "I'm not hiding anything," she said at last, though her tone betrayed her uncertainty. "I am indebted to Norka. He's someone I cannot oppose." "Then allow me to confront him," Bundo responded with conviction. "I have settled my dues with him, and if he approaches me again, he's inviting trouble. And believe me, I will deliver it to him, mother. Now, kindly exit my chamber." The queen's expression contorted in shock. "Are you suggesting that I should go?" she inquired, her tone elevating. "You'll come to wish you had heeded my words, Bundo. When this spirals out of control, don't claim I didn't give you a heads up." With a swift pivot, she exited the room, her fury palpable with each stride. As the door slammed shut, Bundo sank back into his seat, his thoughts racing. His mother's response had validated his doubts. It was a secret she was determined to safeguard. Yet, whatever it may be, it was resolute in its mission to safeguard Masu. Masu was starting to rediscover her true self. After a few days with Prince Bundo, her heart felt lighter for the first time since her father's death. Being with the prince enveloped her in a tranquility she had long been missing. He showed her compassion and attentiveness, consistently ensuring her comfort and security. He had even defended her when no one else would. And for that, she felt a profound sense of gratitude. For Prince Bundo, Masu stood apart from all the women he had encountered before. He had always held a profound concern for others, yet his emotions for her transcended his typical empathy. The harshness of his mother's words reverberated in his thoughts. Is this focused on rescuing the villagers or on her own interests? She was indeed correct. He was unaware of the moment or the manner, but at some point, Masu had captured his heart. Her fragility, her purity, and her subtle resilience captivated him. In the days they shared, his emotions had only grown stronger. She began to reveal herself to him, her timid smiles and spontaneous laughter infusing his space with a comforting glow. He couldn't help but observe her endlessly, entranced by each of her actions. At times, to brighten her mood, he would encourage her to sing. Masu would gladly comply, her melodious voice resonating through the palace garden, infusing it with vibrancy. On those nights, she twirled with joy as her voice filled the air, her essence liberated and light. Bundo was captivated by her presence. Her joy radiated, captivating even the king, who would occasionally pause to absorb her melodies, finding solace for his weary thoughts. Bundo would sit in silence, absorbing each moment, captivated by her presence. Her smile, bright and open, transformed her into a divine presence in those fleeting instances. He experienced a powerful desire to embrace her and press his lips against hers, yet he paused. He wished for her to feel completely at ease in his presence. He was careful not to frighten her off. He found it increasingly difficult to jeopardize the connection they had nurtured, yet his emotions were intensifying, becoming more challenging to overlook with every day that went by. One evening, as they settled into his cherished nook in the garden, the moonlight enveloping them in a soft radiance, they engaged in conversation and laughter with ease. Masu's laughter resonated like a beautiful melody, and Bundo found himself smiling in response. In that instant, their gazes locked. At that moment, everything else appeared to dissolve into nothingness. Her gaze held a fierce intensity, mirroring the passion that ignited within him. They both stood still, the intensity of the moment enveloping them, until Bundo finally broke the silence. With a tender motion, he drew her near, his hands quivering just a bit as he angled her face to meet his gaze. Then, without a moment's pause, he pressed his lips to hers. Initially gentle, the kiss soon intensified, overflowing with the emotions he had long suppressed. Masu remained close. A surge of indescribable emotions washed over her. It was her first kiss, and it surpassed all her dreams and expectations. She had succumbed to a profound affection for this man, her guardian, her noble hero. However, not all felt this happiness. Concealed at the garden's periphery, the queen observed, her expression contorted with fury and revulsion. Her hands tightened into fists as she shot them a fierce glare. This was impossible, she mused with a sense of bitterness. Indeed, Masu possessed a beauty that was undeniable, yet she remained merely a humble girl from the village. Even more troubling, she was tied to Noka. How could Bundo possibly challenge her? The queen's thoughts surged with intensity. She had attempted to reason with Bundo, to invoke fear, yet nothing had proven effective. Observing her son and Masu together at this moment, she realized it was time for a different strategy, something more radical. This connection needed to conclude, regardless of the cost. The following day, as the sun ascended over the palace, a maid entered Prince Bundo's chamber, bearing a meticulously crafted invitation. A letter arrived from the queen, extending an invitation for dinner to him and his guest, Masu. Bundo picked up the letter and gave it a quick look. He scowled, flinging it onto the table. He whispered to himself, hoping this wasn't merely another pretext for conflict. His mother's abrupt shift in tone felt almost unreal, yet for Masu's benefit, he chose to embrace it. Masu had to present herself impeccably for dinner with the queen. Prince Bundo summoned exquisite garments and adornments, making certain she possessed all that was necessary. The palace maids were tasked with meticulously braiding her hair, embellishing it with exquisite beads. As she made her way down the magnificent staircase that evening, Bundo was utterly captivated by her presence. She appeared luminous, her allure shining even brighter in the gentle illumination of the palace. For a fleeting instant, he lost the rhythm of inhalation. Masu noticed the admiration in his eyes and felt a rush of warmth, her steps wavering just a bit beneath his penetrating gaze. A new chapter in their relationship unfolded the night before. Bundo had revealed his feelings for her, and despite her anxiety over the possibility of rejection, she had responded by expressing her love in return. Gazing at her in that breathtaking outfit, the prince was flooded with memories of her gentle touch and the sincerity of her voice. Last night lingered vividly in his mind. The dinner commenced with unexpected success. The queen welcomed them with a radiant smile, her typical severity completely absent. She exuded warmth, her laughter ringing out as she engaged in lively conversation. Even the monarch appeared surprised by her cheerful disposition. Masu basked in the praise from everyone at the table, and for a fleeting moment, it truly felt like a genuine family gathering. Bundo, nonetheless, stayed cautious. This feels almost unreal, he mused, yet he went along with it, chuckling quietly as he observed Masu glow in the spotlight. Following the meal, Masu stood up to assist in clearing the plates. Bundo rose to accompany her, reluctant to let her venture forth alone, yet the queen halted him with a soft gesture of her hand. "No, my dear," she replied. "I want to accompany her. Engage in conversation with your father." She offered him a gentle smile. Bundo paused, his gaze sharpening just a bit, yet he chose to settle back down, opting to avoid any disruption. As he sat immersed in contemplation, the king's voice pierced the silence. "Do you have feelings for her, perhaps?" he inquired, his voice steady and assured. Bundo beamed, his heart brimming with feeling. "Indeed, father, my affection for her runs deep." "She is indeed a fine young lady," the king responded, his head bobbing in agreement. "Your endeavor has my full support. It is time to start coordinating with our relatives to formalize this, and it appears that Noka has finally stepped aside." However, the monarch was mistaken. Noka remained steadfast, biding his time. In the palace kitchen, the queen's attitude had transformed entirely. Her smile had vanished, supplanted by a frigid, furious stare. She turned to Masu, her voice cutting yet inviting. "I refuse to allow you to destroy my family. Your actions have caused sufficient harm already. It is necessary for you to depart. Please refrain from bothering my son." Masu, despite her trembling, held her position firmly. Her voice carried a gentle strength. "I hold deep affection for the prince, your majesty. And he adores me. Leaving him is not an option for me. I'm all alone in this." The queen's eyes blazed with fury. "You gold digger," she spat. "I recognize your kind. Your presence is solely driven by your own interests. Noka has an abundance, and I'm ready to share even more with you. You will return to him, otherwise." "If not what, mother?" a voice interrupted sharply. Bundo stood in the doorway, his face reflecting a blend of anger and disappointment. "I had a feeling about that. I was aware that this was not real. Your generosity barely survived a day. It seems you have an allergy to it, don't you? You are truly astonishing, mother." The queen stood still, her lips parting as if to speak. However, Bundo did not allow her the opportunity. He navigated the room, grasped Masu's hand, and guided her out of the kitchen. His touch was both assertive and soothing. His quietude conveyed a wealth of meaning. Upon his return to the king, Bundo's fury began to wane, and Masu sensed her heart settling once more. The king, catching sight of them, offered a warm smile, oblivious to the recent events. "Masu," he said with warmth, "I would be delighted if you could sing for me tomorrow. Your voice is truly a treasure, bringing me a sense of calm and tranquility." Masu offered a timid smile, inclining her head gently. "It would be my privilege, Your Majesty," she responded gently. She had already captured the king's heart, and perhaps, just perhaps, she could also win the queen's affection. Noka's patience was wearing thin. The queen had assured him of 2 weeks, yet the deadline loomed near, and still, no action had been taken. He strode back and forth in his yard, his jaw tight, whispering under his breath, "Nogio is truly pushing my limits. He believes she has the upper hand over me. She will come to regret this." Profoundly. His expression hardened, signaling his resolve. He could no longer afford to wait. In the palace, Masu's presence was gradually gaining acceptance. To the queen's great frustration, the king appeared to cherish her, frequently asking for her songs and dances to elevate his mood. Even the palace staff admired her grace and humility, yet beneath the surface, Nogio seethed with anger. Masu had completely disregarded her command to vacate the palace, and now she was winning the king's approval. The queen observed, seated, as Masu's voice resonated through the palace corridors. Compounding the situation, the time she had assured Noka had run out. Unease enveloped her, as she contemplated his next move. Noka was quite an eccentric individual, and she was well aware of that fact. That night, her deepest anxieties were realized. A sudden uproar broke out at the palace gates, catching everyone off guard. Noka had arrived, his powerful voice slicing through the silence. "I want my son back," he shouted. His voice brimmed with rage. "Bundo is my child. The monarch is devoid of hair, and I can substantiate this claim." The guards hurried to subdue him, believing he had lost his sanity. Yet Noka pushed back, raising their voice even more. "Indeed, you heard correctly. Bundo belongs to me, and I shall not depart from this palace without him." Their cries reverberated across the palace grounds, sending tremors through all who listened. The queen's heart raced with trepidation as she hurried into the courtyard, her thoughts swirling in a tempest. Their hidden truth had been revealed. Noka had deceived her, and it was all over. All present, the king, the prince, the servants, the guards, stood together, their expressions drained of color, each face reflecting the weight of disbelief. The king stepped forward, his face a blend of astonishment and fury. The prince remained motionless, his gaze fixed and astonished as he beheld Noka. "Mother," he inquired, his voice quivering. "Is this accurate?" Tears flowed down Nogio's cheeks as she faced Bundo. "I advised you to send that girl away. I warned you she would destroy it all. At this point, everything has come to an end. All is gone." Bundo recoiled, as if he had received a blow. Thoughts surged through his mind. Could this be the hidden truth? This was the reason behind his mother's deep fear. How could this possibly be real? How could he possibly be the offspring of such a harsh, cunning individual? His heart plummeted as the gravity of the revelation struck him. The monarch remained still, his complexion wan as the reality unfolded in front of him. His legs quaked as he pivoted and gradually made his way back to the palace, his thoughts swirling in confusion. Nogio, the woman he had cherished despite her imperfections, the queen he had placed his faith in, had turned against him. She engaged in a secret liaison with Noka, and Bundo, the son he had nurtured with great pride, was not his own. His chest constricted with shock. He had never experienced such profound humiliation, such deep betrayal. His head throbbed, as if he were gasping for air. In Abadwizi, the divine hand selected the kings, and it was the firstborn son of the reigning monarch who was fated to inherit the throne. Should an unworthy individual take the throne, the gods would swiftly bring about their demise. If the monarch were to have no heir, the royal bloodline would forfeit the crown entirely. As the king reflected on Bundo, his compassionate nature, his noble essence, and his remarkable likeness, a flicker of hope ignited within him. Deep down, he sensed it, Bundo was undeniably his son. Yet, there was but a single path to uncover the truth. The Engen River flows gracefully through the landscape. It was the revered river where divine beings could unveil the essence of reality. The monarch's determination solidified. He refused to allow this treachery to shatter his family or tarnish his legacy without putting up a struggle. As the first light of dawn broke, he called upon a servant and issued precise commands. Summon the chief priest to the palace at once. Inform him that it is a critical situation. Noka found himself ensnared and bound, punished for the audacity of tarnishing a fallen lineage and for sharing a bed with the queen. The king's wrath towards Nogio brewed quietly beneath the surface. He hesitated to determine her destiny, as his fury simmered intensely. Not only had she betrayed him, but if this were true, she had put the entire royal bloodline at risk. The palace had fallen into disarray. The atmosphere was heavy with unease. The crowd held its breath, anticipation hanging thick in the air as they focused intently on the king, eager to see what he would do next. As dawn broke, the atmosphere in Ubudwizi was heavy with murmurs. The villagers huddled in small clusters, their expressions marked by shock and disbelief. Sofiakwa banished that woman's wickedness. Some expressed their frustration with a shake of the head, while others conveyed their sorrow in the same gesture. Given her demeanor, as if she holds herself above the rest, who could have imagined she would lower herself to such depths? This treatment is unworthy of our king. By noon, the pressure had become intolerable. The villagers journeyed towards the Njin River, a vast and revered expanse of water. Decades had passed since the river served as the setting for a royal trial, yet the tales of its formidable power remained legendary. In moments of uncertainty, only the river held the power to reveal the truth of a prince's heritage. If Bundo possessed genuine royal lineage, the river would cast him aside, ejecting him back to the surface. Otherwise, it would consume him entirely. The atmosphere crackled with a blend of anticipation and trepidation. Many had whispered stories of princes cast into the river long ago, destined to vanish into the depths of oblivion. For some, this was their inaugural experience of the ritual, and their intrigue held them captivated by the unfolding scene. Masu stood near Bundo, her face marked by tears. She wept through the night, consumed by fear that the river could sweep him away. "I must do this, Masu," Bundo said softly, clasping her hands. "Even if I am not destined for the crown, my heart will always belong to you. My affection for you is unwavering, and that will never alter." His voice was steady, yet his eyes betrayed the burden he bore within. Masu nodded, her tears streaming down more rapidly. She yearned to trust him, yet the dread of losing someone dear once more loomed large. "I can't bear the thought of losing you," she murmured softly. "I will not." That morning, Bundo's mother, the queen, revealed the truth to him. She confessed that Noka was her first love, yet she chose to leave him for the king when the chance for a more promising life presented itself. Her family had faced hardships, and marrying the king promised a life of ease and opulence, a reality Noka was unable to provide at that moment. Yet, after a decade of marriage without a child, her desperation had deepened. Noka, now renowned for her herbal expertise, had extended her assistance in helping her conceive. During the progression of his treatments, a series of events unfolded, resulting in him having slept with her. Upon discovering her pregnancy, she felt a surge of panic, believing that Noka was the father of her child. In an effort to silence him, she offered Noka a substantial amount of money. The funds had propelled him to a position of affluence and influence. Yet, it always fell short of silencing him. Now everything was falling apart, and her deepest anxieties had materialized. The villagers assembled with a palpable sense of unease as the chief priest, the voice of the divine, made his entrance. The air was thick with his chants, drawing the crowd into a hushed reverence as he engaged in the sacred rituals. Masu held on to Bundo with all her might, her tears streaming down without restraint. She had resolved her decision. If the river claimed Bundo, she would plunge into the depths after him. Life without him was beyond her imagination. At last, the moment arrived. The prince was bound and, with elaborate ceremony and ritual, cast into the river. The audience inhaled sharply as his form vanished beneath the water's edge. For a few breathless moments, there was only stillness. Suddenly, the villagers burst forth with cries of terror. Indeed, there were tears shed. "The prince is a part of Noka." Masu cried out in despair, fighting against the villagers who attempted to restrain her. She yearned to dash to the river, yet powerful arms held her back. The monarch remained motionless, gazing at the water with eyes brimming with tears. He felt a deep ache at the idea of losing both his son and what he had built. "Calm the waters, and let the fishermen go to bring him back," he murmured, his voice trembling. "Let's wrap this up." He turned to leave, each step weighed down by a sense of loss. "Indeed not, Your Majesty." The high priest interjected. "Hold on." In an instant, the river erupted into a furious turmoil. A brilliant blaze of flames enveloped the water, and with a thunderous roar, a colossal wave propelled Bundo from the depths below. He arrived on the shore unscathed, his form radiating a celestial glow. The audience stood still, jaws dropped in disbelief. Then, tears flowed freely as Masu rushed to embrace him, her face illuminated with joy. The chief priest lifted his hand, bringing quiet to the assembly. "No secret can remain concealed for eternity," he started. "The deities possess great wisdom. The queen engaged in an affair with Noka, who employed dark magic to seal her womb after she chose the king over him. However, when he shattered his own enchantment by sharing a bed with her, the queen became pregnant with the king's child. Bundo is the rightful heir to the throne, selected by divine will. Noka is destined to confront the consequences of his wicked actions." The villagers burst into joyous melodies, trailing behind the royal family as they made their way back to the palace. That day stood out as one of the most joyous in the kingdom's history. Noka found himself pulled into the village square, where he would confront his punishments. The king, consumed by fury, commanded his swift execution. With a single, decisive strike, Noka met his end, his reign of terror extinguished for all time. Regarding Nogio, the queen, she faced exile from the village, destined never to come back. Her betrayal had cost her everything, and even Bundo, though heartbroken by his mother's fate, understood that the law of the land must be honored. With Noka and the queen departed, tranquility and reason resurfaced in Abaduazi once more. Months later, once the dust had settled, Prince Bundo and Yumasu exchanged vows in a magnificent celebration brimming with music, laughter, and joy. The whole village came together to celebrate their union, applauding as they twirled beneath the radiant sun. As they swayed to the music, Bundo gazed into Umesu's eyes, a smile that couldn't be contained spreading across his face. "I believe the sun was named after you," he murmured, "for you illuminate my life in ways I can't begin to describe. I vow to hold you dear for all time." Yumasu returned the smile, her heart brimming with warmth. The deities had certainly shown her favor, and while she longed for her father's presence to witness this moment, she felt genuinely fortunate. She was the most fortunate girl in existence. Years later, upon the king's passing, Bundo and Yumasu ascended to the throne of Abaduazi as its king and queen. Their affection and guidance infused the realm with happiness and abundance, carrying forward the tradition of integrity and compassion that Bundo's father had initiated. Their story transformed into a timeless legend, recounted through the ages, depicting the journey of the prince and the maiden who triumphed against all challenges. I truly appreciate your kind words and unwavering support. They hold immense significance for me, and I find it difficult to express my gratitude adequately. I must depart for now, but I look forward to our next tale together. Farewell.